Big question. Do you think we'll ever be able to protect our mental health and prevent burnout when our whole industry is built in a way that means that we can't say no to clients?
Wow, that is covering a lot of ground. I'm going to start with the second part first, because I don't think the issue with our industry is that we can't say no to clients. I think that's a symptom of a systemic problem with the industry. My background is in advertising, but I think it's quite similar in media and other commercial creative industries, design. I think that the industry itself has for a long time kind of put self-interest in front of the health and well-being and even safety sometimes of its employees. And thankfully now I'm not just some, bitter, raving old loony with this opinion, because the Ad Council of Australia released a report last month. I think some of you probably filled out a census last year in December. They had a census going for 2 weeks, and it was a snapshot of the state of the industry at the moment. And the report just came out last month. And some of the data is actually really alarming and kind of demonstrates that the industry itself had some systemic problems. Like, I think there was like 8% of women had experienced sexual harassment in the last 12 months. 25% of women reported being bullied. That jumped up to 51% for gender non-conforming people, and even 15% of men is terrible. If that's your experience, being bullied is quite kind of huge. There were loads of other statistics. Obviously, they did go into a little bit, not necessarily race, but ethnicity, but quite alarming experiences of discrimination, much higher experiences of discrimination with people of colour, either experiencing or observing discrimination, and also wanting to leave the industry. They then also went into a lot of stuff about experiences of microaggressions and macroaggressions, and it's just rife within the industry. And even comparing sort of Australia to the UK and America, we are falling behind. As an industry, we have some serious sort of health and safety issues. And they're systemic. They're not just one agency here and there. And, we're not progressive when it comes to culture. Like, even things like of LGBTQIA+ responders, 33% said that they hide their sexuality because they're not sure how it will be received at work. So this idea that because we're a creative industry means we're somehow, culturally progressive or on the cutting edge of culture is just wrong when it comes to workplace and health and safety. So anyone who in your workplace that is blaming clients is scapegoating their own systems for the, in terms of the problem. And I think that sets a really bleak scene. But I think hopefully, for me, knowledge is power. And knowing that as someone who works in the industry, knowing that there is this systemic problem, then I think the first thing that you need to do is protect yourself and look after your own mental health, and be aware of your own signs of burnout, and put your own boundaries in place in your own workplace, and understand that, just as clients will take whatever agencies give, agencies will take whatever employees give. And so I think it's really beholden on us. If the people at the top aren't gonna change, then by all means look after yourself, I guess, is the first thing. The other thing I think is that there are some movements helping promote change. Things like the aunties who have come about as just a bunch of women working in the industry in response to ongoing issues of sexual harassment and gender-based discrimination, have created a really solid network of women supporting women within Melbourne. I know that you guys, watching, a lot of you are part of Young Bloods, and I think silence is power sometimes in bad work environments. So the more that you can talk about, if your own workplace has issues around lack of mental health safety and high incidence of burnout, the more that you can come together and talk about it. Safety in numbers. And if you do let them know, if you let your organisation know, if you don't think they're doing enough about it, and then they still continue the same work practices, then, they're being negligent, I suppose. So I think be open, put your own boundaries in place, talk to your peers, and, let's all try and support each other and change it as much as we can.
I think companies are having to listen. There's definitely more and more of that. We've seen more of it. I've actually done now 2 asking for a friends privately for a couple of big agency groups. And it's been a great opportunity for people to get the questions out there and to raise some of the issues that perhaps were kind of like, swept under the rug before. So I think they do have to listen. Ash, do you have a view on like how do we protect our own kind of mental health, prevent burnout? Do you have tips around that?
Yeah, look, I'm going to back Jess up with really acknowledging that it's not an individual. The onus shouldn't be on the individual. And that's sometimes where I find these conversations can go awry. A lot of people think, oh, I'm burning out, or I'm overwhelmed, or my mental health is suffering. What am I doing wrong? And they tend to sort of turn the lens around to almost judge themselves. And you know what? It's not just like a one person. You can't sort of self-care away discrimination, racism, capitalist greed. You can't. And man, I wish that I had the answers here. I'm sure we all do. I think we're starting to move towards hopefully a culture where we can have these conversations and not be totally laughed at. And like you said, a lot of organizations are now actually having to be held more accountable. And maybe that is because, their bottom line is suffering with mental illness being, one of the highest causes for absenteeism at work. For whatever reason, our workplaces, we spend a third of our lives working. Like we may as well make those places as enriching, fulfilling, safe and trusting as possible. So, I think on an individual level, if you're asking this question, I definitely feel like you probably already have, gone, well, am I getting enough sleep? Am I drinking enough water and eating healthy? All the basics, right? And so, yeah, it's about how we can balance, our individual autonomous purpose to take care of ourselves, but also hold our workplaces accountable too.
And you can say no to clients, by the way.
Oh, 100%.
Right? That's a big part.
I mean, it makes me mad when a question like this comes up that sort of suggests that, there's a culture within the agency is like, well, client can't say no to clients. Like, imagine going to a big client and frankly, with that data, that report, in comparison to other corporate sectors, ours fared worse. So the clients are actually better at looking after the mental health of their employees than we are as an industry. And imagine if an agency went to a client and said, oh yes, we'd love to, thanks we'd love to do this, although the ask is too much within the timeline. It's going to put undue stress on our on our staff, and as part of our own internal mental health policy, we're going to need another week or two. What client is going to turn around and go, no, you must work them into the ground? I think that we have to recognize the industry has a problem. And I'm glad you brought up accountability, Ash, because we unfortunately have this, we exist in a bubble. There's this sort of self-fulfilling ecosystem of, publications, agencies, awards, and it all kind of feeds into each other. There's a lack of accountability, and I think it's really, it's time for people to stand up and say, I'm not going to work like this. And there are plenty of agencies where that will look after your mental health because they do recognize that their people are all they've got, really.